TV, 9 p.m. East Coast time in the United States of America. And we've got a bumper rolling, and we're recording, streaming to all kinds of places. Got people in the chat room waiting. Got Ben Cooper standing by. We'll start a countdown to Studio 13. Good evening and welcome to pjnet.tv. I'm your host, Coach Prasick, and I am excited and thrilled to sit here and do this night after night after night. And so many of you join us and have a fellowship in the chat room. For those of you who are watching this live, 9 o'clock on Tuesday night, 9 o'clock on the East Coast, you might be watching this on social media, and we are certainly glad to have you join us, and we welcome you, and we invite you to join the real party at pjnet.tv. Okay, you can go over there. Same thing will be playing, but there's a chat room, and you'll make new friends. So, folks, every first Tuesday of the month, Ben Cooper joins us on the stage. Now, Ben Cooper is no stranger to PJNet. He's always here. I don't know a time you wouldn't find him in the chat room, but nonetheless, he joins us from his home in Pennsylvania. And Ben, today is that day, Groundhog Day. I did not Google or otherwise research that paragon of analytical rigor called a search engine to find out the origins of Groundhog Day, but this whole thing seems rather unscientific and foolish to me.
Well, we're going to dig into some of that, no pun intended, since they are diggers. I live in Somerset County, and Punxsutawney, and it's on your sign there. Most people could never spell Punxsutawney correctly. Is about 40 some miles north of me. So I've never been there on Groundhog's Day. And I'll tell you a couple reasons why throughout the broadcast here tonight. But it started in 1887. It's been a thing. The first groundhog was actually Punxsutawney Pete. But a news media or a paper put Phil in there, and it got broadcast as Phil. And so Pete became Phil early on in the 1800s. And one of the most interesting questions that they always get is, you remember the TV show Lassie?
Oh, yes.
And people always wanted to know, well, it went for so many years, how many Lassies did they have? And some of the Lassies were a boy and some of them were a girl. And they, because of the long hair of a collie, you couldn't tell for sure. But there's some mysterious or mystique around Punxsutawney's Phil, because if you ask, the answer is always the same. There's only one Punxsutawney Phil. Now that's 1887. The lifespan isn't that long for a groundhog. And this mysterious group, it's almost cultic that form around Groundhog's Day and the founders, but they say that Punxsutawney Phil is the same one from the very beginning, but they feed him and give him a special elixir that he knows no end, and his age goes on and on. He's timeless. So only the inner circle really knows the answer to that question. It's not public knowledge, and people always try to get that out of them, but they're not successful.
Who started this hoax?
Well, it was a group of people in 1887, and I'll tell you some of the backstory of groundhogs. You do see groundhogs out early before winter is complete. And it's nearly always a male that comes out of the burrow first. The male is out basically looking for a female to mate with. Mating happens very, very early in the year, and they want to be the first one out of the burrow to see if they're, so they go out and do an inspection to see, is the weather warm enough, because like a lot of animals, mating is dependent on the hours of daylight and temperatures. And so if it's warm enough, they go out and the males see if there's any. And there's competition in that, just like there are in other animals. So the male goes out, and somewhere back in the late 1800s, they decided to wear the top hats, to wear the overcoats, and start this society and make prognostications using this rodent that comes out of the ground, who, by the way, lives a very luxurious life. And I'm told some of his life, he actually is a, what do you Floridians call us Northerners that go down for the winter? Snowbirds or something like that.
We're on the air, Ben. I'm not at liberty.
Well, some of them call the kinder words of snowbirds, that they fly south for the winter. Yep. But Punxsutawney Phil, I actually was in a conference in Punxsutawney. It wasn't during Groundhog Day in winter, but I spoke at a Pennsylvania grazing conference and was one of the speakers. And Punxsutawney Phil, or his representative, came and was the key guest, not speaker, because he doesn't speak. But he came. When you're in Punxsutawney, that's what's there. It's a town of 5,770 people.
I've seen more science in the Farmer's Almanac.
There's yeah, and yet last year they broke all records of the number of attendance.
Oh gosh.
That little town of 5,770 people had over 40,000 people last year, right prior to COVID. And so it almost is, people put Groundhog's Day at Punxsutawney on their bucket list. They want to be there and be part of it. Now, and some will say, well, this is just totally ridiculous.
Yes, I would be among them.
I could tell you there's a lot of ridiculous things that happen in this country and in the world that draw crowds, and it becomes a moneymaker. So it actually is the town moneymaker for an odd time. Who else is going around on February 2nd where there's something really great? Doesn't matter what the temperature. We just got about 8 inches of snow here since Sunday. So the weather would have been terrible. But just like the football games where they were played in states where the governor said no crowds are allowed, that's Pennsylvania. Because the Steeler games were played with cardboard crowds and fake crowd noise. If you watched any of the footage today, they had cardboard people showing up at Punxsutawney today. But over 40,000 people stood in line to have buckwheat pancakes and sausage and all this stuff, all the accoutrements that go along with Groundhog Day. And I will say that alcohol is not allowed. It's not permitted. Doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It just, they purposely make it a more of a family-friendly kind of thing. But there's 3 major colleges that are close to Punxsutawney, within an hour or two's drive. And kids, when I went to Penn State, they would skip school and go to Punxsutawney for the day, for that morning. And they used to make it more or less a college drinking thing. And then they took out the desire to, they didn't serve any, didn't want to see any on site to make it more family friendly. So 40,000, that encompasses that sign that's behind you on the PJ Net. It won't hold that won't hold 40,000 people.
Not at one time.
It looks like a little parklet, and that's it. But they just converge on this small little town, and it grows and grows up until COVID. The temperature probably would have held back, but last year was a very warm winter. We had almost no snow, and one of the few times that Punxsutawney Phil did not see his shadow, and said it would be a early spring. And I blame that little rodent on COVID and all the other things that went on because it's so unknown. Only 15% of the time since 1887 has he not seen his shadow and predicted, so to speak, by words of men wearing top hats and cloaks, that he predicted that it would be an early spring. So 15 versus 85% of the time, he sees his shadow. If the sun's out, he sees his shadow. So, I mean, that's the basis of the whole entire thing. But this whole community gets wrapped up in it and has for years. Some things about that that I find interesting, and then I'll let you make a few comments. He has only been right 38% of the time.
Well, you'd be right 50% of the time just by random guessing, wouldn't you?
You would think. So let me just ask you, I know you have another job. If that person provided 38% of the time the right part for the customer, how long would they be employed?
Right. Or if this airplane successfully landed 38% of the time, would you board it?
Right. I think there's been some value jet or some things in the past that were like that a little questionable whether you were going to get there safely or not. I think it probably would have a lot to do with the only political thing I'll say is, I think it would be great if politicians would be right 38% of the time. That would improve their odds and their community base. But they don't, a weatherman that was only right 38% of the time. So it's not about the facts. It's about what kind
this
of
is
hype
a,
that
a
you
stupid tradition.
grow
Is
around.
what it is.
It's all about the hype.
Yeah, it's a tradition.
When I write a book, and then I write the second one, now you got to start thinking about what's your brand. JD has a brand that he puts on his cows, and PJNet has that eagle in the red, white, and blue. That's their logo, but it's also their brand. And you start doing so. Punxsutawney years ago, over 100 years ago, came up with this brand. It brings money into their small little 700 community population community, and they've kept with and gone. Several years ago, was the highest up until last year was 35,000, and they added 5,000 because of the warm spring. It was already warm weather, allowed more people to go out. There's tour buses that go out there, and they have to park miles away and shuttle them in because drop them off and park because there's no room. But it's a lot of hype and a lot of people that are interested, and it isn't just to the United States or Pennsylvania or the Tri-County area or wherever. It's worldwide. People know of Punxsutawney Phil, so their marketing is great. Their overhead cost is nothing.
I'm sure that's trademarked.
From the groundhog standpoint, they are very hard to train. You've got to get them at a very young age. Growing up on the farm, they were a varmint. They are a rodent. And we had a hillside farm. And if that tractor hit a hole with the wagon and you were stacking the wagon in there, you could lose the whole wagon load of hay. And so they were something that we didn't want around the farm. And we would hunt them, or other people would come and hunt groundhogs. I will say I have eaten groundhog before. Like everything else, it does taste like chicken, but dark meat chicken. But they're a pest on the farm. They also, like all other rodents, have to gnaw constantly. If they don't, their teeth will grow so fast at a rate that it will impale the lower teeth and the bottom teeth. That I've seen pictures of groundhogs that the lower teeth actually are growing up into the nostril and can pierce the brain of the groundhog. So rodents have to chew constantly. So That's just something that, whether it's a beaver, a rat, or a mouse, or a groundhog, that they chew constantly. So I find it fascinating. When I was thinking about what on February 2nd, I'm due to do PJNet, and I live in Pennsylvania, and I talk about animals, and I mean that's what the news is all about. So this year he did see his shadow. That means we have 6 more weeks, or it doesn't mean anything at all, depending on what you want to believe.
38% of the time, it's correct.
38% of the time, yeah, you could probably just roll the dice that many times and
flip a coin,
or flip a coin and get better odds than that. But it's all about the brand, the packaging, and the hype. And I see that in our culture today. Truth doesn't matter. It's all about the hype.
It's the narrative.
If you say something and build something up enough time and get enough people to follow it, especially today, truth doesn't matter. History doesn't matter. We can change the history books. We can change whatever we want because we've said it enough time. We've got enough people along. And so we're now starting to build our brand. Brands could be, I think JD did something, writing for the brand was one of his things. And that brand can be a good, positive thing. And it could be something that tends to lead you away from the truth. I'll ask you a biblical question. How many times did a prophet in the Old Testament have to be right?
100%.
100%.
If they're wrong once, they're not a prophet.
They're not a prophet. And what was the consequences?
Well, they wouldn't be anything else either. They would be fertilizer.
They would be dead. Right. They would be dead. So as we look at this, I see a commonality of the fun things that happen in Punxsutawney on February 2nd. When I was in Arkansas, a small little town called Toadsuck, Arkansas, they have a festival in April every year, and it draws crowds. So this isn't unique to Punxsutawney. Every little community has their own thing, and whatever they can, they just surround it and they build it up. And like Punxsutawney Phil and Gobbler's Knob and Groundhog Day, they exploit it for whatever they can, and it grows bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where you've got an actor like Bill Murray at 6 o'clock, 5:59. When it flips over, you hear Sonny and Cher singing "I Got You, Babe" every day, every day, every day, and it becomes a phenomenon. Whether it is something positive, whether it is something negative, it's most of the time something that disturbs or distracts you from real truth and what really is going on. And so those are kind of my thoughts. Any comments or things that you have to say about Punxsutawney Phil and Groundhog's Day?
Well, earlier you were correct. Here in Florida, we thrive on tourism. We are one of the few states without a income tax. So we welcome the snowbirds, which are people from up north seeking the warmer, balmy weather down here. We welcome them, and we have a very high sales tax, high tax on consumables, cigarettes, booze, all that kind of stuff, lottery tickets. So, from the chamber, the outward-facing Chamber of Commerce, that's we call them snowbirds. But in our day-to-day conversations, we call them Yankees. Now there's a difference between a Yankee comes down here, enjoys the warm weather, and then goes back home. You know what a Yankee that comes down here and stays down here is called? A damn Yankee. So, I'm fascinated by your observation. The truth is obscured. The truth really doesn't matter now, does it? Facts don't matter. It's actually even worse than that, okay? Because when I have engaged in debates with people with an opposing position, they have a set of facts of their own, and I could no more be convinced by those facts, and of course I have my facts. And so it's worse than I reject the truth, is I've substituted another truth for it. And this is the ultimate, I mean, this is the slippery slope, because now we are in a culture where evil is called good and good is called evil. There's a Rubicon. There's a point at which there's no return. And I think that we are seeing manifestations of that. There are many mysteries that we may never solve this side of heaven that have been debated for thousands of years. But there's still a consensus that there is such a thing as absolute truth. And so long as there is, we should seek absolute truth. But our culture has taken a just total detour around that, a rejection of the truth, and now has substituted alternative truths. Okay, and
in Romans chapter 1, it tells us, it warns us that there'll become a time when they exchange the truth for a lie, and that happened as far back as when they took prayer out of the school in the early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a watershed moment. That happened even as far back as 1925, when the Scopes monkey trial
mm-hmm.
was in favor of Christianity, but it started to plant that seed of doubt, and
mm-hmm.
it started to have it. So, the Bible's always going to be right. They're going to exchange the truth for a lie, or for something that doesn't matter. Get them all off top dead center and get them, fascinated about something other than truth, and especially biblical truth. I know we're beyond. I think I saw a glimpse of our next guest.
Yeah, that shake you up, Ben?
So, what's that?
It sometimes, people get distracted. Say, what's that? Well, we have another guest coming up. But, well, Ben, as foolish as I think the whole thing is, I appreciate you sharing about it. I know it's really a tradition. All communities have festivals. Even Enterprise, Alabama has the Boll Weevil Festival. And that's a good thing in and of itself. But some of the foolishness that it takes on can be problematic. But Ben, thanks for sharing. And folks, before we went on the air, we debated whether bees or elephant are the most social creatures apart from humans, and there is no consensus there. He thinks bees are. I think elephants are. I have a sociology degree, so that's it. Ben, always a pleasure to have you join with us, and thank you for sharing, and thank you for all the wisdom, the stuff that you contribute in our chat room. But it's great to have you up here, in the spotlight on the stage. You're a gentleman and a scholar, and a wonderful member of the PJNet team and family, and we appreciate so much you sharing with us tonight.
Thanks, Coach.
All righty, folks, that was Ben. And you know what? What you see right there is a view from one of the many cameras that orbit. Look at the new rug my wife got. You see that? Isn't that cool? The dirt sticks to it. Before it was just plywood floor and you could sweep it up easier. Not anymore. No. We've got it where you can't do anything. So, well, folks, as fun as this has been, we've got to take a little break here and get ready for Del Didway, who's up next. What's in a name? Well, with a name like Prasic and a name like Didway, that ought to be a good one to unwrap. All right. Thanks to all the folks in the chat room. Stay with us. Don't touch that dial. Before I leave, I would challenge you to ask yourself 2 questions. Here's the first one. What is the boldest thing that you have ever done for Jesus Christ? Number 2, how long ago was that? It's my hope and prayer that we won't be satisfied with either answer.